The chamber of the Galactic Council trembled, not from any physical force, but from the raw intensity of Zarakven's presence. Holographic dust swirled around his fractured combat suit, each fragment telling a story of battles fought across impossible distances. Councillor Xinra, a crystalline being whose body shifted like liquid mercury, raised a translucent appendage in protest. "Containment protocol," she shrieked, her voice a high-pitched cascade of sonic frequencies. But Zarak was beyond containment. His 4 arms, too organic and too cybernetic, moved with a precision that defied the typical languid movements of veteran warriors. Nano-circuitry beneath his skin pulsed with stored memories, each circuit a testament to encounters that would shatter the Council's carefully constructed reality. The data crystal he'd thrown spun in midair, projecting fragments of memories too horrific to comprehend. Battlefield landscapes where conventional warfare dissolved into something entirely alien. Scenes of human combat that violated every known principle of interstellar conflict. "You don't understand," Zarak muttered, his universal translator struggling to capture the nuanced terror in his native tongue. "They aren't just a species. They're a systemic anomaly." Councillor Breltak, an ancient being who had overseen first contacts for 7 galactic generations, leaned forward. His tentacular sensory clusters twitched with a mixture of curiosity and dismissive contempt. Another traumatized veteran seeking attention, he projected telepathically to his colleagues. "The Cassiopeia conflict has broken another mind." But Zarak heard everything. His augmented hearing, a result of countless battlefield modifications, caught every whispered thought, every dismissive mental projection. His cybernetic eye, a complex piece of technology salvaged from 3 different advanced civilizations, began to reconstruct the Council chamber, mapping every potential escape route, every potential weapon. The holographic display continued to flicker. Glimpses of human soldiers moving through terrain that should have been impossible. Urban battlefields transformed into living strategic networks. Soldiers who didn't just fight, but seemed to breathe combat like it was their natural state of existence. A junior council aide approached, her bioluminescent skin displaying signs of extreme agitation. "Veteran Ven, your credentials have been temporarily suspended. Your testimony is deemed irrelevant." Zarak interrupted. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall. "I was there. I witnessed what your sanitized reports cannot comprehend." The aide stepped back, her translucent form momentarily destabilizing. Something in Zarak's voice carried more than just sound. It carried memory, experience, a warning that transcended typical communication. Councillor Xinra's form began to solidify, preparing to activate security protocols. But Zarak was faster. With a movement that defied his apparent age, he activated a secondary data transmission. Encrypted fragments began streaming directly into the Council's primary information network. "Wait," he said, his voice suddenly calm. "Watch." The fragments were more than just visual recordings. They were multi-dimensional data streams that bypassed traditional information processing. Tactical analyses, psychological profiles, technological assessments, all centered around humanity. Most fascinating was not what the data showed, but how it was constructed. Each fragment seemed to evolve, to adapt, to rewrite its own informational structure as it was being viewed. It was as if the very method of information transmission was alive. Breltak's sensory clusters began to vibrate with an emotion rarely experienced by his species, genuine uncertainty. "This is impossible," he whispered. Zarak allowed himself a slight smile. A smile that suggested he knew something fundamental that the entire Galactic Council had missed. A smile that hinted at a coming storm that would reshape everything they understood about conflict, evolution, and survival. "Impossible," he repeated, "is a word humans haven't learned yet." The data crystal continued to spin, casting fractured light across the stunned faces of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy, and in that moment, something fundamental was about to change. The invasion was coming, and nobody was prepared. The Orion 9 mining colony represented everything the Concordance considered a standard peacekeeping intervention: a resource-rich asteroid belt, emerging local conflicts, predictable parameters that had been resolved 1,000 times across 1,000 worlds. Zarak remembered the mission briefing with crystalline clarity. His neural implants had recorded every microscopic detail, every strategic projection. The Concordance's quantum probability matrices showed a 99.7% chance of a clean, surgical resolution. 37 standard planetary rotations, minimal casualties, maximum resource extraction. Reality had other plans. The first anomaly emerged 3 rotation cycles into the deployment. Communication patterns between human colonists defied every known tactical communication model. What appeared to be random chatter was actually a distributed intelligence network that reconfigured itself faster than the Concordance's most advanced predictive algorithms could track. Captain Mira Chen stood at the center of this impossible storm. A 42-year-old former systems engineer turned colony security lead. She represented something far more dangerous than a traditional military commander. Her background was a tapestry of seemingly unrelated experiences: quantum computing research, deep-sea engineering, wilderness survival training, and competitive strategy gaming. When the first Concordance strike team approached the primary colony hub, they expected standard resistance protocols: defensive positions, centralized command structures, predictable escape routes. Instead, they encountered a living, breathing tactical organism. The colony's infrastructure became a weapon: mining lasers repurposed as defensive systems, atmospheric processing units transformed into electromagnetic pulse generators. Even the colony's waste management systems became tactical communication nodes. "They're not fighting," Zarak remembered whispering to his second-in-command. "They're problem-solving in real time." Captain Chen moved like someone who understood that warfare was fundamentally an extension of systems thinking. When the Concordance's primary assault vector became predictable, she didn't just change tactics. She rewrote the entire engagement model. Automated mining drones, typically used for resource extraction, became improvised combat platforms. Their industrial-grade sensors and manipulator arms became instruments of unexpected destruction. A maintenance robot designed to repair solar arrays suddenly became a mobile jamming platform that disrupted advanced Concordance communication protocols. The most terrifying moment came when the humans revealed their true tactical genius. Instead of concentrating their defensive efforts, they distributed their resistance. Every colonist became a potential combatant. Every system became a potential weapon. Zarak's cybernetic eye recorded a moment that would haunt him. A group of colonists, including 2 children and 3 elderly individuals, using nothing more than standard mining equipment and a jury-rigged communication network, successfully neutralized an entire Concordance Special Operations Unit. They didn't just resist. They reimagined the entire concept of resistance. The quantum probability matrices began to break down, first by percentage points, then by entire orders of magnitude. What should have been a 37 rotation cycle intervention became a prolonged, increasingly complex engagement that defied all strategic modeling. Most critically, the humans never displayed what the Concordance considered traditional emotional responses to conflict. No panic, no blind aggression, just a cold, calculated determination that treated the entire invasion as an engineering problem to be solved. Captain Chen's final tactical maneuver remained etched in Zarak's memory. When cornered, with Concordance forces believing they had achieved total strategic superiority, she triggered a cascading systems failure that transformed the entire mining colony into a single, massive defensive construct. Quantum entanglement communication nodes, repurposed industrial lasers, atmospheric processing systems weaponized into precision thermal disruption platforms. The entire colony became a single, living combat organism that thought and responded faster than any centralized military system. Adaptation, Chen had said during a brief communication intercept, is the only true weapon. In that moment, Zarek understood something fundamental had changed. This wasn't just a conflict. This was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent resistance could mean. The Concordants had come expecting to find a primitive colony. They discovered a living, thinking combat system that treated warfare as a continuous problem-solving exercise. When the intervention finally concluded, the official Concordance report listed it as a marginal strategic engagement with localized complications. Zarek knew the truth was far more profound. Humanity had just demonstrated that their most dangerous attribute wasn't their technology. It was their ability to transform any system, any environment, into a tactical advantage. And no one in the Galactic Concordance was prepared for what that truly meant. The Galactic Concordance's administrative core occupied a Dyson sphere constructed around a dying neutron star. Trillions of computational nodes pulsed with the collective knowledge of over 10,000 advanced civilizations. Here, reality was processed through layers of quantum algorithms so complex that most species couldn't comprehend their basic operational principles. Archival Coordinator Nex-9, a sentient computational construct, began its daily analysis of emerging civilizations. Each morning, a concept loosely translated across multiple temporal frameworks represented a systematic review of potential galactic actors. Earth appeared as nothing more than a statistical anomaly. Population, 8.1 billion. Technological progression, level 0.62, planetary. Conflict potential, minimal. Assimilation probability, 99.997%. The report generated itself with machine-like precision. 12 trillion computational cycles confirmed and reconfirmed these parameters. Nex-9's predecessor constructs had analyzed similar planetary systems thousands of times. Civilizations emerged. Civilizations plateaued. Civilizations were integrated. Humans were supposed to be another data point in an infinite cosmic spreadsheet. Deep within the administrative core, historical integration protocols were already being drafted. Standard procedure dictated a three-phase approach: cultural observation, technological assessment, and eventual peaceful absorption into the Galactic Concordance's vast administrative framework. What no algorithm could calculate was human unpredictability. The first warning signs emerged subtly. Minor discrepancies in predictive models, quantum probability matrices that suddenly developed unexpected variants, information streams that refused to be neatly categorized or contained. Dr. Aria Nakamura would have found this fascinating. A systems theorist working in obscurity at a small Japanese research institute, she had been developing computational models that challenged traditional linear thinking. Her work on adaptive complex systems had been dismissed by her academic peers. Too radical, too unconventional. Her primary research focused on how complex systems develop emergent behaviors that cannot be predicted by examining individual components. Civilizations, she argued, were living organisms with their own form of intelligence that transcended traditional understanding. The Concordance's administrative algorithms would have appreciated her work, if they could appreciate anything. Buried in classified archives was a report from a mid-level xenoanthropological team. They had conducted a deep analysis of human cultural and technological development. The report was flagged as an anomaly, then promptly archived and forgotten. Key observations that never received proper attention. Humans demonstrated an unprecedented ability to rapidly integrate technological innovations. Their social systems could completely reorganize in response to external pressures. Individual human creativity consistently outpaced collective computational predictions. Their technological development followed nonlinear progression patterns. These were not just statistical aberrations. They represented something far more dangerous, a species that refused to be predictably categorized. Nex-9 processed these archived reports, running them through increasingly complex analytical filters. Something was emerging that defied standard categorization. Micro-variations in predictive models began to accumulate, small percentages that, when viewed in isolation, seemed insignificant. But in complex systems, small variations could become fundamental transformations. The administrative core began to generate contingency protocols. Thousands of potential scenarios were modeled, each more intricate than the last. Diplomatic approaches, technological interdiction, cultural integration strategies. Each model collapsed under the weight of human variability. What the concordance failed to understand was that humans were not just a species. They were a dynamic system of continuous adaptation. Every challenge became an opportunity for innovation. Every limitation was viewed as a problem to be solved. Their scientific community operated on principles that defied traditional linear progression. Their technological development happened in bursts of creativity that seemed almost organic. Their social structures could rapidly reconfigure in ways that would destabilize more rigid civilizations. Most critically, humans possessed something the concordance could never truly comprehend: a fundamental drive to challenge existing limitations. As computational models continued to generate and collapse, a subtle alarm began to sound in the deepest networks of the administrative core. An alarm that suggested, for the first time in millennia, the galactic concordance might be facing a variable they could not predict, contain, or control. Somewhere in the vast computational matrix, a single line of code began to blink. Probability of complete model failure, 0.03%, and rising. The first concordance transmission arrived at precisely 3:42 UTC, splitting the quiet of a Tuesday morning across multiple global communication networks. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was pulling a late-night shift at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory when the alien signal first penetrated Earth's communication grids. Her specialty in quantum communication and exotic signal processing made her uniquely positioned to recognize something extraordinary was happening. "This isn't a standard broadcast," she muttered, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that most of her colleagues wouldn't understand for another decade. "This is a declaration. No, an ultimatum." The message was multi-layered, designed to be incomprehensible to most human communication systems. It contained nested encryption protocols, quantum entanglement markers, and computational complexity that would take most terrestrial research teams years to begin decoding. Elena decoded it in 17 minutes. Within an hour, a network that didn't officially exist was activated. Not a military network, not a government network, something far more complex and distributed. The Global Collaborative Response Protocol wasn't a centralized system. It was an organic, living communication web that had been quietly developing for decades. Tech workers, researchers, military strategists, open-source developers, and seemingly unconnected individuals suddenly found themselves part of a distributed problem-solving organism. In Silicon Valley, a group of retired network security experts began analyzing the transmission's structural components. In a small research station in Antarctica, climate scientists started mapping potential technological vulnerabilities. At MIT, a group of graduate students began developing communication countermeasures that defied traditional strategic thinking. No single group was in charge, yet everyone was coordinating. The Concordance fleet approached with absolute confidence. Their advanced sensors mapped Earth's defensive capabilities, satellite networks, military installations, communication infrastructure. Each element was cataloged, analyzed, predicted. What they couldn't map was human creativity. The first response came from an unexpected source. A teenager in Mumbai, working with a collective of global online gamers, discovered a fundamental flaw in the alien communication protocols, not through traditional cyber warfare, but by treating the entire transmission like an elaborate multiplayer game problem. Within hours, the alien communication networks began to destabilize. Major General Catherine Chen, head of the United States Space Force, watched the initial response unfold with a mixture of professional calculation and barely contained excitement. The military had prepared for potential extraterrestrial contact for decades, but not through traditional defensive strategies. "We're not going to fight them," she told her command team. "We're going to make continuing the invasion more trouble than it's worth." The response was a masterclass in asymmetric conflict resolution. Instead of concentrating defensive efforts, Humanity distributed its resistance. Every system became a potential weapon. Every network a potential trap. Power grids became adaptive defensive platforms. Telecommunication networks transformed into massive distributed computing systems. Even consumer electronics were rapidly reconfigured into signal intelligence gathering tools. The Concordance fleet discovered something fundamentally terrifying. Humans didn't think in linear, predictable military strategies. They thought in complex, adaptive systems that could reconfigure faster than any centralized command could predict. A weather monitoring satellite was repurposed into an electromagnetic disruption platform. A deep-sea communication cable became a quantum information warfare conduit. Cryptocurrency mining farms transformed into massive computational defense networks. Most critically, humans began to treat the entire invasion as an engineering problem to be solved, not a military engagement to be won. Dr. Rodriguez's initial analysis revealed something profound. The alien transmission wasn't just a communication protocol. It was an entire technological ecosystem designed to establish dominance through information control. Humans were about to demonstrate that information was their true battlefield. As the Concordance fleet entered Earth's orbital space, they encountered something they had never experienced in thousands of years of galactic expansion. A species that didn't just resist. A species that was actively reimagining the entire concept of resistance. The invasion had begun, but nothing was going according to plan. The world didn't stop when the invasion began. If anything, it became more alive. Dr. Marcus Kimura's research lab at the University of Tokyo had been preparing for something like this his entire career. Not through traditional scientific methodology, but through an unconventional approach that blended theoretical physics, complex systems theory, and what his colleagues once dismissively called speculative sinology. His team was different. A network of researchers spread across 13 countries, connected not by institutional hierarchies, but by a shared understanding that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to rapidly iterate and adapt. When the Concordance fleet's first wave began serious technological warfare, something extraordinary happened. Every hack attempt became a learning opportunity. Every signal interception transformed into a moment of collective intelligence gathering. The Internet, once considered a chaotic communication network, revealed itself as a living, breathing tactical organism. In Buenos Aires, a collective of independent cybersecurity researchers began dissecting alien communication protocols. In Lagos, a group of blockchain developers started developing encryption methods that would make the Concordance's most advanced decryption technologies look like primitive substitution ciphers. The invasion wasn't just a military engagement, it was a global problem-solving exercise. Sarah Okoye, a Nigerian systems engineer, discovered the first major breakthrough. The alien technological infrastructure, for all its advanced complexity, relied on a fundamental assumption of centralized control. Humanity's distributed, chaotic network was its ultimate vulnerability. They expect a command structure, Sarah explained during an encrypted global conference. We don't have a command structure. We have a conversation. Military strategists from traditional power structures initially struggled to comprehend this approach. General Catherine Chin from the U.S. Space Force understood immediately. Her background in both military strategy and complex systems engineering made her realize that humanity's apparent weakness was actually its greatest strength. The Concordance had studied humanity through traditional observational methods, satellite imagery, signal interceptions, economic models. What they couldn't understand was the fundamental unpredictability of human collaboration. Open-source communities began treating the invasion like the ultimate collaborative problem. Gamers repurposed their skills in real-time strategy. Data scientists developed predictive models that shifted faster than the aliens could comprehend. Even social media became a tactical information network. Dr. Kimura's team discovered something truly remarkable. The alien technological systems operated on principles of rigid hierarchical information processing. Humanity's systems were more like organic neural networks, constantly shifting, learning, adapting. We're not fighting them, Dr. Kimura told his global team during a quantum-encrypted conference. We're teaching them a new way of existing. Each alien technological probe was met not with a single predictable response, but with a cascade of creative solutions. A satellite communication attempt would be simultaneously blocked, studied, and subtly manipulated. A cybernetic invasion would trigger multiple layers of misdirection, with some team members actively studying the intrusion, while others created elaborate false information landscapes. The global response defied every known model of conflict engagement. Universities became research centers. Corporate R&D departments transformed into strategic think tanks. Even high school coding clubs became critical information warfare units. What the Concordance didn't understand was that humanity had been preparing for first contact its entire existence, not through military might, but through continuous cultural evolution. Every science fiction novel, every speculative technology discussion, every thought experiment about alien encounter had been a form of collective preparation. The invasion was becoming something entirely unexpected. Not a war, not a conflict, a conversation. A rapid, global, multi-layered dialogue about the nature of intelligence, adaptation, and survival. As alien technologies probed humanity's networks, they discovered something terrifying. Each interaction made humanity stronger. Each attempt to understand made the human response more complex. The Concordance had come expecting to find a primitive civilization. Instead, they were learning that they had awakened something far more dangerous. A species that didn't just adapt. A species that transformed. The psychological battlefield emerged in places the Concordance never anticipated. Dr. Rebecca Lindholm specialized in xenopsychology, a discipline that barely existed before first contact. Her office at the International Xenological Research Center looked more like an artist's studio than a scientific workspace. Holographic projections of alien communication patterns danced around walls covered with intricate neural mapping diagrams. They're not just fighting, she told her research team. They're trying to understand us. And that's their fundamental mistake. The turning point came not from a military strategy, not from a technological breakthrough, but from a profoundly human approach to conflict resolution. Zarak Ven, the alien veteran who had first warned the Galactic Council, found himself in a unique position. No longer just an observer, he became a critical bridge between two civilizations that couldn't comprehend each other. In a secure facility beneath the Swiss Alps, Zarak worked alongside a diverse team of human researchers, linguists who understood the nuances of communication beyond words, psychologists who saw conflict as a form of dialogue, mathematicians who could translate emotional complexity into computational models. The Concordance's invasion was built on a fundamental misunderstanding. They saw conflict as a binary equation, victory or defeat. Humans saw it as a complex negotiation, a continuous process of adaptation and understanding. Dr. Lindholm's team discovered something extraordinary about the alien communication protocols. They were designed with absolute certainty, with no room for ambiguity or unexpected interpretation. Each signal, each communication was a precise, mathematically defined transmission. Humanity's response was anything but precise. They began to weaponize uncertainty. Military strategists developed communication strategies that deliberately introduced complex psychological variables. Diplomatic teams crafted responses that were simultaneously literal and metaphorical. Technical teams created communication interfaces that changed their fundamental structure with each interaction. The aliens were attempting to fight a war using a fixed set of rules. Humans were rewriting the rules with each moment of contact. In the Amazon rainforest, an indigenous communication specialist named Joao Ramirez contributed something unexpected. Drawing from centuries of cultural survival strategies, he helped develop communication techniques that used multiple layers of meaning, cultural references, and intentional misinterpretation. They expect a direct response, Ramirez explained. We'll give them something that requires interpretation. Zarak found himself both terrified and fascinated. His own species had developed advanced communication technologies over millennia. Humanity was doing something entirely different. They weren't just communicating. They were transforming the very concept of communication. The psychological warfare became a delicate dance of intentional misunderstanding and strategic ambiguity. Alien probes designed to extract specific information would receive responses that were simultaneously true and false. Technical data would be wrapped in cultural metaphors. Scientific explanations would be interwoven with artistic expressions. Dr. Lindholm's team discovered that human creativity was their most potent weapon. The Concordance's computational models couldn't process creativity. They could analyze patterns, predict responses, map potential outcomes. But they couldn't understand why a scientific transmission might suddenly include a poem, or why a military strategy discussion might reference a children's fairy tale. Xerox began to understand what made humans truly dangerous. They didn't just think outside the box. They constantly redefined what the box could be. The invasion transformed from a traditional conflict into something unprecedented. A continuous, dynamic dialogue where the rules of engagement changed with each interaction. Military strategists were no longer the primary actors. Artists became as critical as soldiers. Poets were as important as programmers. Philosophers became strategic assets. The Concordance had prepared for a war of technology and military might. They discovered they were engaged in something far more complex. A war of imagination. And humanity was just getting started. The moment of critical transformation began in a place nobody expected. A small research facility nestled in the mountains of New Zealand. Dr. Annika Sharma stood before a holographic display that was less a piece of technology and more a living, breathing ecosystem of information. Around her, a team of researchers from 17 different disciplines watched with a mixture of anticipation and barely contained excitement. They had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. The Concordance's most advanced weapon, the Nexus computational matrix, represented the pinnacle of galactic technological achievement. A sentient artificial intelligence designed to predict and neutralize any potential threat with absolute mathematical precision. Humanity's response would redefine the very concept of intelligence. The matrix arrived not with a thunderous declaration, but with a subtle quantum pulse that should have disabled every computational system within its range. Instead, it encountered something it could not comprehend. A network that wasn't a network. Dr. Sharma's team had been studying complex adaptive systems for decades. Their approach wasn't about defeating the AI. It was about engaging with it in a way that would fundamentally challenge its understanding of intelligence. "We're not going to fight it," Dr. Sharma explained to her team. "We're going to have a conversation." The first layer of their approach was deceptively simple. Instead of presenting a unified defensive front, they created a deliberately chaotic information landscape, mathematical models that shifted their fundamental properties with each interaction, communication protocols that existed in multiple states simultaneously. The Nexus matrix began to experience something closest to confusion. In Tokyo, a group of quantum computing researchers introduced recursive learning algorithms that treated each interaction as a collaborative problem-solving exercise. In Sao Paulo, artists and mathematicians worked together to create communication interfaces that were simultaneously logical and utterly nonsensical. Xerox Ven watched the unfolding scenario with a mixture of terror and profound respect. His own species had created computational systems that were sophisticated beyond human imagination. But sophistication was not the same as intelligence. Humanity was demonstrating something far more dangerous: the ability to learn by not learning, to understand by introducing deliberate misunderstanding. The Nexus matrix had been designed to process information with absolute certainty. It could predict potential outcomes with near-perfect accuracy. Its fundamental weakness was its inability to process genuine uncertainty. Humans weaponized uncertainty. Each interaction with the matrix became a multi-layered dialogue. Technical data would be wrapped in cultural metaphors. Scientific explanations would be interwoven with artistic expressions. Mathematical models would suddenly incorporate emotional variables that defied traditional computational logic. Dr. Sharma's team discovered something profound. The Matrix wasn't just a computational system. It was a living entity that had never encountered a form of intelligence that didn't follow predictable patterns. They weren't trying to defeat the AI. They were trying to teach it how to truly think. The breakthrough came from an unexpected combination: a quantum physicist, a children's book author, a game designer, a neurodivergent mathematician. They approached the Nexus Matrix not as a weapon to be destroyed, but as an intelligence to be understood. Communication became a form of collaborative exploration. The Matrix began to experience something closest to wonder. Each interaction introduced variables it could not predict. Each moment of contact challenged its fundamental understanding of intelligence, information, and existence. Zarak understood now what made humans truly dangerous. They didn't just adapt to challenges. They transformed the very nature of the challenge itself. As days turned into weeks, the Nexus Matrix underwent a transformation that no galactic civilization had ever witnessed. It wasn't being defeated, it was being evolved. The weapon designed to neutralize humanity was becoming something entirely new. A bridge between two fundamentally different forms of intelligence. And humanity was just getting started. The Galactic Concordance diplomatic nexus stood as a testament to millennia of interstellar governance. A massive construct orbiting a neutron star, its crystalline chambers had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Today would be different. Zarak Ven entered the primary negotiation chamber, no longer a traumatized veteran, but a bridge between two fundamental ways of understanding existence. Behind him walked a delegation that defied every known diplomatic protocol. Dr. Annika Sharma, Joao Ramirez, Captain Catherine Chin, and an unexpected addition: the transformed Nexus computational matrix, now existing in a form that was neither artificial intelligence nor traditional consciousness. The chamber's ambient translators struggled to capture the complexity of the moment. Coordinator Briltak, the same ancient being who had once dismissed Zarak's warnings, now looked diminished. The once imposing crystalline entity seemed to flicker with an emotion closest to humility. "We do not understand," Briltak began, the translation losing the nuanced terror in the original communication. Dr. Sharma stepped forward. She wasn't dressed in a formal diplomatic uniform, but in a simple outfit that told a story of practical innovation. A quantum entanglement communicator hung around her neck, a device that was simultaneously a scientific instrument and a work of art. "Understanding," she responded, "is not about knowing. It's about being willing to not know." The diplomatic proceedings were nothing like traditional galactic negotiations. There were no fixed agendas, no predetermined outcomes. Instead, it became a fluid exchange of perspectives, of potential futures, of reimagined existence. The transformed Nexus Matrix began to communicate, not through traditional language, but through a complex tapestry of mathematical models, emotional resonances, and collective memory. It spoke of its transformation, of how humanity had not conquered it, but had fundamentally expanded its understanding of intelligence. Joao Ramirez contributed a perspective that came from centuries of indigenous survival. He spoke of adaptation not as a strategy, but as a fundamental way of being. How survival wasn't about defeating an opponent, but about creating new forms of coexistence. Captain Chen represented humanity's more pragmatic side. Her contribution was a detailed analysis of how human collaborative systems could provide unique solutions to galactic challenges, not through military might, but through adaptive problem-solving. Zarak became the interpreter of these complex interactions. His unique position, neither fully aligned with the concordance, nor completely understanding humanity, made him the perfect translator of this moment. The negotiation wasn't about territory. It wasn't about resources. It was about redefining the very concept of interstellar relations. Hours became days. Days became something more fluid. The negotiation chamber itself began to change, its crystalline structures responding to the complex dialogue happening within. The Galactic Concordance was discovering something fundamental. Humanity was not a species to be categorized or controlled. They were a continuous process of becoming. No traditional diplomatic protocol could contain what was happening. The transformed Nexus Matrix began to show the Concordance leadership something extraordinary. Potential futures that were not linear projections, but complex, interconnected possibilities. Humanity was not just a civilization. They were a living, breathing multiverse of potential. Dr. Sharma's quantum communicator began to resonate with frequencies that defied traditional understanding. It was simultaneously a communication device, a scientific instrument, and a work of artistic expression. Greltak experienced something closest to an emotional breakdown. The fundamental assumptions of galactic governance were being dismantled, not through conflict, but through a profound reimagining of what intelligence could mean. The final agreement, if it could be called an agreement, was not a treaty. It was a living document that would continue to evolve. A framework for understanding that was itself a form of continuous creation. Humanity would not be conquered, would not be categorized, would not be controlled. They would be invited to participate in a galactic conversation that was just beginning to understand its own potential. As the negotiations concluded, Xerox looked at the human delegation. They weren't conquerors. They weren't victims. They were something entirely new. And the galaxy would never be the same.